The string quartet faded into soft applause as my sister Sophia said I do in the sunlit garden of the Chicago Plaza Hotel, but my chest tightened with a fear that had nothing to do with her perfect day. Across the rows of smiling guests I caught sight of Vanessa, my ex from 2 years ago, weaving through the crowd with that familiar sharp smile that always meant trouble. Tiffany sat beside me in her tailored navy suit, her hand resting lightly on mine under the white tablecloth, and she whispered, "Breathe, Ivy, whatever comes, I'm right here with you." The words should have calmed me, but they only reminded me how much I had risked by bringing her today. My parents sat 2 rows ahead, Dad in his crisp black suit, Mom in her traditional AO dye she had altered to fit the Western wedding, their faces glowing with pride for Sophia, the golden child who had done everything right, married a successful lawyer, given them the picture-perfect daughter-in-law. I was the older one, the one who had moved to the city for a marketing career, the one who was supposed to settle down with a good man and start giving them grandchildren by now. Instead, I had spent years hiding who I really was, terrified that the truth would shatter the family honor they had worked so hard to build after leaving Vietnam for a better life in suburban Chicago. Vanessa had been my college roommate turned secret lover back when I was still trying to convince myself it was just a phase. She wanted us to come out together, to hold hands in public, to tell my parents, but I always pulled back, citing my mom's health, my dad's strict expectations, the way the aunties at Tet gatherings would gossip if they knew. The breakup had been ugly. She accused me of using her, then discarding her when things got real, and I had not spoken to her since. Somehow she had stayed friends with Sophia through mutual college circles, and now here she was invited as a guest to the wedding I had dreaded for months. Tiffany and I had met 6 months ago at a quiet art gallery opening in downtown Chicago. She was a confident corporate lawyer, out and proud, with a warm laugh that made my guarded heart open slowly. We had taken things carefully at first: dinners, long talks, late-night drives along Lake Michigan, where I told her about the walls I had built around my identity. She never pushed, only listened, and when I finally asked her to come to the wedding as my date, she said, "Only if you're ready for what that might mean." I thought I was ready, or at least I wanted to be. As the ceremony ended and guests moved toward the ballroom for the reception, my mom turned and hugged me tightly, her perfume the same jasmine scent from my childhood. "You look so pretty today, Con," she said, using the Vietnamese endearment, "but when are you bringing home a nice boy like your sister?" I forced a smile and introduced Tiffany as my good friend from work. Mom nodded politely, but her eyes lingered a second too long on the way Tiffany stood close to me. Dad shook Tiffany's hand firmly, welcome, but his tone carried the weight of unspoken questions. Sophia pulled me aside during the photos, her veil still perfect, and whispered, "Ivy, you seem tense. Is everything okay?" I lied and said it was just wedding nerves. Inside, my mind raced with every possible outcome of the evening, the way one wrong word could unravel years of careful pretense. Tiffany squeezed my hand again as we walked into the ballroom, the chandeliers sparkling overhead, and for a moment I let myself imagine what it would feel like to walk through life openly with her. No more hiding, no more half-truths. But the fantasy shattered when I saw Vanessa at the bar ordering a drink, her eyes locking onto mine with unmistakable intent. The night was just beginning, and I could already feel the ground shifting beneath me. The toast started with Sophia and Mark's friends sharing funny stories, and everyone laughed, but my laughter felt hollow. I kept glancing at Vanessa, who had taken a seat at a nearby table chatting with cousins, but her gaze kept drifting back to me. Tiffany noticed and leaned in. "You don't have to face her alone." Her voice was steady, her eyes full of the quiet strength that had drawn me to her in the first place. I nodded, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Flashbacks hit me hard, memories of late nights in college with Vanessa whispering promises we both knew I could never keep, the guilt that followed every time I chose silence over truth, the way I had convinced myself that protecting my family was the right thing even if it meant losing pieces of myself. Now here I was, 28 years old, still paying the price for those choices. As the first dance began and couples filled the floor, Tiffany asked me to dance. I hesitated, then took her hand, and we moved slowly together, her arm around my waist, feeling natural and right in a way nothing else had for years. Guests smiled at us, assuming we were just friends, but I could feel the weight of my parents' eyes from across the room. Dad frowned slightly. Mom whispered something to an auntie. The song ended, and we returned to our table, where Sophia raised a glass to family and love. I raised mine too, but my hand shook slightly. Vanessa stood up, then walking toward our table with purpose, her heels clicking on the marble floor. My heart slammed against my ribs as she stopped right in front of me, a glass of champagne in her hand. "Well, Ivy," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "bringing a date to your sister's big day. Does your family know who she really is to you?" The question hung in the air like smoke, and I felt the first cracks forming in the careful life I had built. Tiffany straightened beside me, her presence solid, but I knew this was only the beginning of the storm I had invited by daring to bring the truth into this room full of expectations. Vanessa did not wait for an answer. She turned to my parents, her voice carrying across the table with practiced sweetness. "Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, I just want to say how happy I am for Sophia, but I couldn't help noticing Ivy here with this lovely woman. You know, Ivy and I were very close in college, closer than most friends." She smiled, but there was poison behind it, the same poison that had ended us when I refused to tell my family about us. Mom blinked confused. Dad set his fork down slowly, his face hardening. "What do you mean, Vanessa?" Sophia asked from the head table, her smile faltering for the first time that day. Vanessa laughed lightly. "Oh, nothing, just that Ivy has always had a way of keeping secrets, especially from the people who love her most." The words landed like stones in still water, and whispers started rippling through the surrounding tables. I sat frozen, my mind screaming at me to say something, anything to deflect, but the fear that had ruled me for so long held my tongue. Tiffany, however, did not hesitate. She stood up slowly, her hand still in mine, and said calmly, "Vanessa, this is not the time or place." Her voice was level, but there was steel underneath, the kind of strength I had always admired but never quite possessed. My dad stood too, his voice low and measured in the accent that still carried traces of Saigon. "Ivy, what is this woman talking about?" I could see the confusion turning to disappointment in his eyes, the same look he had given me when I chose marketing over the family business path he had planned. Mom clutched her napkin, her knuckles white, whispering in Vietnamese something about saving face. I felt the weight of every family gathering, every Lunar New Year where aunts asked when I would marry the good son of their friend. Sophia walked over, her gown trailing behind her, face pale. "Ivy, tell me this is not happening on my wedding day." Her voice cracked and the guilt hit me like a wave. I had promised myself I would not ruin this for her, yet here we were because I had finally tried to live honestly. Tiffany squeezed my hand harder and I found my voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, Dad, this is Tiffany, my girlfriend." The word girlfriend felt both liberating and terrifying as it left my lips. Gasps echoed around us and a cousin at the next table dropped her phone. Vanessa crossed her arms, satisfied. "See, I knew she would never tell you herself. She's always been ashamed of who she is." The accusation stung because part of it was true. I had been ashamed not of loving women but of how that love clashed with everything my parents had sacrificed for us, immigrating, working double shifts so Sophia and I could have opportunities they never did. I remembered the nights Mom cried when neighbors asked why I was not dating the nice Vietnamese boy from church, the way Dad lectured me about family duty and carrying on the name. Tiffany stepped forward, her posture straight, and said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear clearly, "I love Ivy, and she loves me. We are not ashamed." Her declaration sent a fresh wave of murmurs through the room, and I saw aunts covering their mouths, uncles shaking their heads. Dad turned to me, his voice trembling with anger. "Ivy, we raised you better than this. This is not who we are." The words cut deep because I had heard them before in my own head every time I pushed Tiffany away, fearing this exact moment. Sophia started crying quietly, her new husband Mark trying to comfort her while shooting me a look that mixed pity and betrayal. I felt the price of my silence and my truth colliding all at once, the internal war I had fought for years now spilling into the open on the one day my family wanted perfection. Guests began standing, some leaving the ballroom, others staring openly. Vanessa sipped her champagne, watching the chaos she had sparked with a satisfied smirk. I turned to Tiffany, my eyes filling with tears, and whispered, "I'm sorry I dragged you into this." She shook her head. "No, Ivy, this is not on you alone. We chose this together." Her words gave me a spark of courage, but it was not enough to stop the panic rising in my chest. My mom sat down heavily, her face pale as if the world she knew had cracked open. Dad paced a few steps, then stopped, pointing at me. "We will talk about this later in private." But the damage was already spreading like cracks in ice, and I knew private would not stay private for long. The reception music tried to continue, but the energy had shifted from celebration to shock. I held Tiffany's hand tighter, feeling the warmth that had become my safe place amid the cold judgment now surrounding us. This was the moment I had feared my whole adult life, and yet standing here with her beside me, I also felt the first faint stirrings of something like freedom, even as the cost stared back at me from every familiar face in the room. The whispers grew louder as more guests realized what was happening. A great aunt from the old neighborhood clutched her pearls, muttering in Vietnamese about disgrace and how the community would talk. My dad motioned for us to follow him to a side room off the ballroom, his face set in the stern lines I remembered from childhood scoldings. Mom followed, still in shock, Sophia trailing behind with tear-stained cheeks, her perfect makeup ruined. Tiffany stayed by my side, never letting go of my hand as we walked through the gauntlet of staring relatives. Vanessa tried to follow, but Mark stepped in front of her, saying firmly, "This is family only." Inside the small lounge with its velvet chairs and dim lighting, Dad closed the door and turned to me. "Explain yourself, Ivy." His voice was controlled, but I could hear the hurt underneath, the years of unspoken expectations crashing down. I took a deep breath, the words I had rehearsed in my head for years finally coming out. "Mom, Dad, I've been trying to tell you for so long. I am gay. Tiffany is my partner and I love her." Mom gasped, covering her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "But Con, how can this be? We did everything right for you." Sophia sat down heavily, her veil askew. "You chose today of all days to do this, Ivy, my wedding." I felt the betrayal in her voice like a knife, the way my silence had protected her illusion of a normal family now shattered. I tried to explain the years of fear, the nights I cried alone after breaking up with Vanessa because I could not face telling them the moral weight I carried every time I smiled through questions about boyfriends. Tiffany spoke up quietly but firmly, "Mr. and Mrs. Nguyen, I respect your family and I love your daughter. We did not plan for this to happen today, but hiding was hurting Ivy more every day." Dad shook his head, his hands clenched. "Respect? You call this respect? Bringing shame on us in front of everyone." The word shame landed heavy, the same word that had haunted Vietnamese American households like ours, where saving face meant more than personal happiness. I saw the conflict in Mom's eyes, love for me warring with the cultural duty she had instilled since we were little. Sophia stood up, pacing. "I always knew something was off with you, Ivy, but I thought you would grow out of it. Now my guests are out there gossiping about our family." The pain in her voice mirrored my own guilt, the trade-off I had made by choosing this moment, but also the price of never choosing at all. Flashbacks flooded me, the time in high school when I had a crush on a girl and buried it so deep I dated a boy for 6 months just to please my parents, the college years with Vanessa where love felt real but secrecy poisoned it, the way I almost lost Tiffany early on because I canceled plans whenever family visited. Each memory carried the cost of my choices, the loneliness, the self-doubt, the constant question of whether I was selfish for wanting to live authentically. Vanessa had been right about one thing: I had hurt her by refusing to stand up for us, but standing up now meant hurting the family I loved. Dad finally spoke again, his voice breaking slightly. "We came to this country for you girls to have opportunities, not to see you throw them away on this lifestyle." The word lifestyle felt like a dismissal of everything I felt for Tiffany, the deep connection, the way she saw me completely. Mom reached for my hand but stopped midway, her cultural conditioning winning for the moment. Sophia wiped her eyes. "I just wanted one day without drama, Ivy." The accusation hung there and I felt the full weight of being the older sister, the one who was supposed to set the example. Tiffany remained calm, her presence a quiet force. "I understand this is a lot, but Ivy has carried this alone for too long." The room fell silent except for the distant music from the ballroom, a reminder that the world outside continued while ours fractured. I made a decision then, standing taller despite the trembling in my knees. "I will not hide anymore. Not from you, not from anyone." The words felt right, but the looks on their faces told me the path ahead would be paved with more pain. As we left the room to rejoin the reception, the stares followed us, and I knew the real confrontation had only just begun. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of forced smiles and awkward conversations. Guests avoided our table or offered polite but distant nods, the kind reserved for family scandals. Sophia tried to salvage the night by cutting the cake early, but her laughter rang hollow. Vanessa had been escorted out quietly by security after causing more scenes, but the damage was done, the seed of doubt planted in every mind. As the evening wound down, my parents insisted we come back to their house in the suburbs the next morning for a family meeting. Tiffany drove us home to my apartment in the city, her hand on my knee the whole way. "You were brave today, Ivy," she said softly, but I could hear the worry in her voice. I leaned my head against the window, watching the Chicago lights blur past. Brave or selfish, I don't know anymore. That night I barely slept, replaying every word, every look, the way my mom's shoulders had slumped when I said the word gay, the anger in Dad's eyes. Tiffany held me close, her steady breathing the only comfort in the storm. The next morning we drove to the family home, the same modest 2-story house with the manicured lawn where I had grown up, hiding magazines under my bed and deleting texts from girlfriends. Inside, the living room smelled of jasmine tea, and the tension was thick enough to choke on. Dad sat in his usual armchair, Mom beside him on the couch, Sophia and Mark on the love seat. Tiffany and I took the remaining chairs. Dad started without preamble. Last night was unacceptable, Ivy. You embarrassed your sister and this family. I nodded, the guilt still fresh, but something inside me had shifted after speaking the truth aloud. I know, Dad, and am sorry for the timing, but I could not keep lying forever. Mom spoke then, her voice soft but firm in her accented English. Con, we love you, but this is not the life we dreamed for you. No husband, no children, how will you be happy? The question pierced because I had asked it of myself countless times, wondering if my happiness was worth their disappointment. Sophia added, her voice still raw. I spent months planning that day, Ivy, and now all anyone remembers is you and your girlfriend. Mark stayed silent, but his discomfort was clear. Tiffany listened patiently, then spoke with respect. Mrs. Nguyen, I understand your concerns. But Ivy and I are building a life together, a real one based on love and honesty. The word honesty landed like a challenge because honesty had been the one thing I had withheld from them for so long. The conversation stretched for hours, accusations of betrayal mixing with pleas to think of the relatives back in Vietnam who would be ashamed. Dad threatened to cut me off from the family business investments I had helped manage, the financial ties that kept me connected. Mom cried, recalling how she had prayed for good daughters. I felt every tear like a weight on my chest, the moral dilemma tearing me apart, love for family versus love for self. Yet as I looked at Tiffany, her calm strength reminding me of all the time she had waited patiently, while I wrestled with my fears, I knew I could not go back. I stood up at one point, my voice steady for the first time. I have spent years choosing your comfort over my truth, and it almost destroyed me. I choose me now, and I choose Tiffany. The room went quiet, Dad staring at me as if seeing a stranger. Sophia shook her head. I hope you can live with this choice, Ivy. As we left the house, the door closing behind us felt both like an ending and a beginning. Tiffany pulled me into a hug in the driveway, whispering, you did the right thing. But the right thing carried a price, the strained silence from my family, the whispers that would follow me in our tight-knit community, the internal voices still questioning if I had traded one form of pain for another. Weeks turned into months, and the consequences unfolded slowly like cracks spreading through glass. At work, colleagues who had heard through the grapevine gave me sympathetic but distant smiles, some avoiding lunch invitations altogether. My cousin Lon, who had always been like a sister, called to say she was disappointed that I had chosen this lifestyle over family unity, her words echoing the prejudice I had feared. The family business emails from Dad stopped coming, the quarterly meetings I used to attend now scheduled without me. I moved in with Tiffany full-time, her apartment overlooking the lake becoming our sanctuary where we cooked meals together and talked late into the night about the future. She never said I told you so, only held me when the doubts crept in. One evening after a particularly hard day where Mom had hung up on my call, I sat on the balcony staring at the water. Tiffany joined me, handing me a cup of tea. You are not alone in this, Ivy. We will build our own family if they cannot accept us. Her words soothed but could not erase the ache of lost Sunday dinners, the empty seat at Tet celebrations. I started therapy recommended by a friend from work, unpacking the layers of internalized shame, the way cultural expectations had shaped my self-worth. Sessions brought back memories of childhood where being different meant being wrong, the subtle comments from aunts about proper girls, the pressure to excel in school, to compensate for any perceived flaws. Tiffany supported every step, attending pride events with me, holding my hand openly for the first time in public. Yet the betrayal from within the family cut deepest when Sophia sent a text saying she needed space, and that Mark felt uncomfortable around me now. I cried in Tiffany's arms that night, questioning if my awakening had been worth the fractures. The moral trade-off loomed large. Was personal authenticity more important than family harmony, or had I been selfish in forcing the truth on a day meant for joy? Tiffany reminded me gently that hiding had its own costs, the slow erosion of my spirit, the resentment that could have poisoned our relationship. Slowly, small victories emerged: a coworker who confided she had a gay brother and offered support, an old high school friend who reached out after hearing the news saying she admired my courage. The family business ties remained severed, but I found freelance work that gave me independence, a freedom I had never known. Tiffany and I planned a small commitment ceremony, just for close friends, no big announcements, just us promising to face whatever came together. Through it all, the internal conflict raged less fiercely each day, replaced by a growing sense of peace, the kind that comes from aligning actions with truth. Yet the pain of my parents' silence lingered, a constant reminder of the price paid for my choices. One afternoon Mom called unexpectedly, her voice hesitant. "I miss you, Con." The words opened a crack in the wall, and we talked for an hour, carefully avoiding the big issues but reconnecting on safe ground. It was not full acceptance, but it was a start, and I clung to it as proof that perhaps love could bridge the divide eventually. Tiffany watched me after the call, her eyes full of pride. "You are healing, Ivy, and that is the greatest gift you can give yourself." A year after the wedding, Sophia finally agreed to meet for coffee in a neutral cafe downtown. She arrived looking older, somehow her eyes carrying the weight of the family rift. We hugged awkwardly at first, then sat across from each other, stirring our drinks in silence. "I have been thinking a lot, Ivy," she said finally. "Your choice hurt me that day, but I see now how much you were hurting too." The admission brought tears to my eyes, the first real acknowledgement from my family that my pain had been valid. We talked for hours about the pressure she felt as the younger sister, the expectations placed on both of us, the way Mom and Dad had never learned to separate their dreams from our realities. She admitted the community gossip had died down, and that Mark had come around after seeing how isolated I had become. It was not forgiveness overnight, but it was a bridge, a willingness to try. Dad remained distant, but Mom started inviting us for Sunday dinners, small steps where Tiffany was included, though conversation stayed surface level. The prejudice lingered in subtle ways, an auntie who changed the subject when I mentioned Tiffany, a cousin who skipped family events, but the outright rejection had softened into uneasy tolerance. Tiffany and I moved forward with our lives, planning a future that included perhaps adoption or fostering the family we chose. My career flourished in a new company where I could be open about my relationship without fear, the independence a direct result of breaking free from old ties. Through it all, the internal awakening continued. Moments of doubt still surfaced, but they no longer defined me. I had learned the true cost of silence, the slow death of the self, and the price of truth, the temporary loss of belonging. Standing on the balcony of our new apartment overlooking the Chicago skyline one evening with Tiffany beside me, her arm around my waist, I felt a profound gratitude for the woman who had stood by me through the storm. She turned to me smiling softly and said, "You are my wife in every way that matters, Ivy." The word wife echoed the declaration she had made at the wedding, now spoken in private peace, and I pulled her close, knowing we had earned this happiness. Looking back at the path that led here, the confrontation, the tears, the hard decisions, I wondered about the choices that shaped it all. Did Ivy have the right to reveal her truth so publicly at her sister's wedding, causing immediate pain and lasting family strain, or was continuing to hide her identity the greater moral failing that would have cost her the authentic love and self-respect she finally found?